Thank you for listening to Tara Lynn's A Geek Saga podcast. This episode features audio from a discussion panel that was recorded at DragonCon 2021. This is Nailed It or Failed It, Jon Snow, where we will be discussing whether or not the show did a good job portraying Jon Snow's character. My name is Tara. I'm your moderator. I am the founder and organizer of the first ever Song of Ice and Fire Game of Thrones convention in the U.S., which is Ice and Fire Con. I am also a webcaster, podcaster at a couple webcasts. You can find me at a Geek Saga all across the web, and I also have a genre lit series podcast called Sagas and Sass. And on my left here we have.
Hello, I'm Matthew. I am a volunteer at Ice and Fire Con, and I have done various things. You may know me from a viral Tormund cosplay a couple years ago, and also check out Westeros, an American musical. It's dope.
Oh yeah, I'm in that too.
She's in that too.
Marcy Aaron. Really, my life revolves around fantasy books. I still toast Rob Stark. That's pretty much my Tinder bio.
Oh, they can't hear you. You need to. Yeah, some of these mics are really. Wait, hold on. No, that one's okay. Just you have to lean them really close.
Like eat an ice cream cone. Just put your face.
Testing. I've been leaning back most panels. Okay.
Yeah, no, you gotta lean in.
Am I good now?
Yeah.
Okay. Cheers to Rob Stark. That's it.
So, personally, I'm going to start this off with saying that Jon Snow seems like an odd character to me to choose as... Well, we did a Nailed It or Failed It... Were you on the Nailed It or Failed? No, I don't think you were. We did a Nailed It or Failed It panel that was like a general show Nailed It or Failed It panel in 2019. And we talked about some really great characters. To be honest, I think it mostly focused on the ones they failed it on. There were a couple that we, were like, okay, yeah, they nailed it with like Arya or whatever, sort of most of the time. But to me, Jon Snow feels like a weird, nailed it or failed it character because I personally just am bored by him 90% of the time. And I'm being honest with this from the start because I don't want anybody to think that I am being biased in the fact that the show might have nailed it with him because I don't know that I'm the best person to come to with this opinion because I think that while there were things that they did in the show that felt like really odd and maybe not in character for him, and the end, of course, for all of the characters was so rushed. From the start, he really just seemed like the emo little white boy that was written by Martin. So I think I want to pass this on. We'll go to Matt first, and then we'll go to, Marcy, right? Marcy, I couldn't really hear the masks and the microphones, y'all. So we'll go to Matt first, and then we'll go to Marcy and hear their thoughts, and we'll discuss a little bit amongst ourselves. But please, if you have comments or questions, definitely come up to the microphones because a Nailed It or Failed It panel is all about audience participation and discussion because we need to hear how other people felt about it because there's only 3 of us up here. So Matt, how did you feel about it?
So, I love all the Starks. And I love Jon Snow. But I think why I failed it on Jon's show's arc is that his story is a lot of setup for things that then didn't necessarily pay off strongly. Some things we can talk about there. His parentage reveal, one of the central mysteries of the story, and how much that impacted the story and also impacted his character. His death, which feels like a thing that should monumentally change the way a character is, but Jon Snow post-death feels pretty similar to Jon Snow pre-death. And, by the way, Game of Thrones spoilers, everybody. If anyone's been seeing this, run. And so I think I like a lot of the things that Jon Snow, the narrative points and the plot points, I think, are fine, but how they are set up by things that happened previously that do not come to fruition, I think, are a little disappointing.
Marcy, you back?
I think John is kind of that never fails, always does the right thing character. And in that, I find that to be a failure because he's predictable. Like, he's going to do the honorable thing. So I never was kind of like, what's he gonna do? Like, I was like, this is what this guy's about to do. And that kind of, it made him just less interesting for me. I wasn't really invested in him as a character. He's predictable. He's gonna do the good guy, the honorable guy thing, which is like the only Stark trait I think he got. And he's not crazy, so at least that that part didn't come from the rest of his lineage. But
I mean, I think that bringing up like the parentage, like, and how they revealed that is important. It's not necessarily. It doesn't necessarily change much about how he is as a character in the show, but it does change how the audience views him, right? And the fact that they kind of, I mean, in my opinion, kind of like rushed and pushed it on us. And part of that might just be like, as a book reader who has been waiting, how many years now for this like to actually be revealed in the books. Like, we all know it's a thing. Well, I guess I don't want to say we all, but like, if you have ever, like, if you've read the books more than once and you have ever ventured into fandom online, you know that there was this like R plus L equals J theory, and to have it revealed the way it was revealed, and it was just kind of like, yeah, here's what it is, and this is it, period. And it didn't. I don't necessarily think that it should or could or would have changed how Jon Snow acted, but it did absolutely change the viewer's perception of him. And I agree that was not done in the best way possible. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Because you're the one who brought it up now.
Yeah, so I agree. So there's, when we're analyzing a character, there's sort of the internal character within the story and whether their arc is being served. And then there's the arc of whether the fans' expectations of that character and their arc are being served. And so I think it's very easy to argue that John's internal character story was very straightforward and consistent, as people are saying. He kind of did what you expected him to do. And I mean, in a story of betrayals and disappointment, someone kind of reliably doing what they are expected to do and surviving to the end is an accomplishment in and of itself. But I think a lot of what I was saying is that things are set up in the audience's expectations or the reader's expectations that then the way it played out sort of failed it or disappointed that character arc.
Yeah, it was and it also didn't help that we get the reveal that he is a Targaryen by blood. He's still a bastard, really. Like, I mean, there's like this minimal proof that Lyanna and Rhaegar got married, and also Rhaegar was still married to Aaliyah, so like, also there's that. Like, and I mean, I know that like the Targaryens they were married to more than one person, but those were like their siblings. So, just saying, this is like a real rough situation here. And we get this like reveal that he is a Targaryen, and technically they were, legally married secretly, that like nobody, and the only person who knows this is Bran through like warging, and it's like, it's your voice, like, but I guess Bran's is the best story ever told, so I'm sorry I had to go there. So I feel like we and I mean, even Jon himself is just kind of like, I'm nobody. And like, even after he finds out who he actually is, he's still in this, he was raised as a bastard. He joined the Night's Watch. He has still, like, he pledged his life to the Night's Watch until he died, and then he pledges his life to Daenerys. And listen, I'm not playing Daenerys as a whole, but I'm like the whole, like,
second half of her.
Well, just no. I mean, really, just how he, really, just how like weirdly just obsessed with her he is. Like, I don't know. What do you think of? So, what do you guys think about that? Because to me, it's like I absolutely didn't expect Jon to be like, yeah, whatever, I'm the king now. But at the same time, I also his like weird like attachment and obsession with Daenerys. Like, sure, she has dragons, but she like even when he sees how like how kind of just not right she is, and the things that she's doing that are like, I mean, just murdering entire like families. I mean, when she not the father Tarly, Dick and Tarly, when like she murders his son, you know, like that sort of thing. Like, Jon Snow knows all this stuff is happening, and he still is just like, yeah, it's fine because she's Daenerys. And I think that for somebody who has spent the entire series sort of like he does the things like when he's with the wildlings and stuff, he's not quite on the level as he perceives it, but he's still doing right. And then he gets with her, and it's like he just tosses all of that out the window a little bit. So I don't know, how you guys feel about that?
I think he's naively like holding on to her OG endgame with she wants to do the right thing. Like, she wants to, you know, she wants to do away with slavery and things like that. Like, her original endgame was an honorable one, and I think he like holds on to hope that that's where it's going to go. And he's kind of convincing himself of otherwise. But at some point you got to be like, all right, like, this isn't working out. But he just held on to that for whatever reason. I really think if anyone, obviously modern day, and I know this is fantasy, but if you were to find out the person that you are like in love with is really like a family member and you didn't realize, like, you'd be like, we gotta see other people. It's bizarre to me that he was just kind of like, well, this is uncomfortable, but it's all right. Like, that's like the only thing. That's okay. There's a fail. There's a fail for Jon. But yeah, I think he was just holding on to her endgame and hoping that she would eventually revert back to what she originally wanted, which was a great thing. I mean, that's why people still are like such huge Dany fans. They think of like early Dany, because there's no way you like her after like the end of the last season, like, unless you're just holding on to early on Dany, which is what I think Jon was doing.
I mean, I think that the reveal that she's his aunt, I mean, he's very clearly like pretty freaking uncomfortable with it. To me, it almost felt a little bit like he was scared of like he doesn't really necessarily want this, but he's also scared to say no, which is like problematic in and of itself. So,
but is that like a love thing, or is that like a Stockholm thing? Like, I think he really like had feelings for her and was just like, this is not appropriate, but dang, I don't want to like step away. Like, this is, I don't know.
Personally, I felt like it was maybe more of a Stockholm thing. I don't know. What do you think, Matt?
It also might be sort of a Stark honor thing.
Oh,
so,
yeah,
like,
that too, yeah.
Our Stark men, when they commit to something, they hold to it, often to their death. And so in this, Jon may have been like, I had slept with her, and so he was going to hold to that until it led to his death. And you know, I mentioned his post-death sort of arc. A lot of Jon's post-death arc is sort of this vacillation between his single-minded focus on destroying the Night King and this almost sort of seemingly suicidal tendency, or this sort of resignation to his eventual death. And so I think you can kind of see there. The other thing about his Daenerys sort of obsession, fascination, is that Jon's story is one of him being sort of, from the beginning, he's set up as the outsider. He's the outsider among the Stark children, being a bastard. He goes to the Night's Watch, which is in itself a group of cast-offs and outsiders. He finds some family there, but then he gets sent off to the wildlings, finds an attachment there, but there he is again an outsider. They all know him as the Crow. He then returns to the Night's Watch, this found family, and finds now that his views on the wildlings have made him again an outsider there. he does eventually get leadership there, but is betrayed by those people, stabbed by that found family, and is cast out essentially. He then returns to the North and, is rejected by the North with Sansa and Davos, as we see. And so when you get to that, when he gets to Daenerys, he finds someone who is accepting of him and interested in him and finds his actions interesting, whether it's him bowing to her. His lack of interest in power really fascinates Daenerys, whose story is all about her desire to protect versus her desire to control. And so I think a lot of what we're seeing with Jon and Daenerys is he's holding on to this place that welcomes him and accepts him. And that's why he's also so nervous about telling Daenerys about his origin, because he's afraid it's going to be another thing that's going to push him into being an outsider again.
Yeah, no, you're totally right on that. Like his whole story is about, like, as soon as he feels sort of accepted, he is pushed off, to the side again. And I think that with Daenerys, it's at the end there where he finds out what his parentage is. It's almost like the opposite. It's like he's not an outsider anymore. He actually is supposedly like more viable as the heir as being the heir to the throne than she is. Hence his constant I don't want it, which was just hilariously just repetitive and bad, honestly. Not because you don't believe it, because he doesn't actually want it, but the fact of the matter is that Daenerys is more of an outsider than he is. And he doesn't even see that because he has been treated as an outsider his entire life. First as a bastard, and then even as a member of the Night's Watch. They're still outsiders. And then he, like you said, he joins the Wildlings, and then he's pushed away from the Night's Watch. Then he goes back to the Night's Watch, and he's in this weird, not accepted by either group. So yeah, he finds that acceptance with Daenerys, only to realize that he can't actually find that acceptance with her because he outstrips her. He is actually more important than her, according to Bran. I'm sorry, but just the idea of the only person in the entire realm who knows that he actually is the quote unquote bigger, better heir to the throne is this kid who's yeah, the trees told me. It's just how
I mean, when you've got these freaky ice men creature things that steal babies, and I don't think warging is the craziest thing within the Game of Thrones
absolutely
world.
not, no.
But yeah, it's quite inconvenient for Bran to be his backup.
Yes.
in terms of what
happened.
happened.
In addition to his half brother swearing this is true, he also has his best friend and his best friend's wife finding a book that says they got married. So, really,
I forgot
this
about
is tons
that.
of evidence.
Oh, I forgot about that. Listen,
Not Sam?
I'm sorry. Let me just Benny off on why says, I'm sorry, I just forgot about that book.
You forgot about the Gilly erasure?
I forgot about that book. I kind of forgot about that book. About as much as Danny forgot about Euron and his
Forgot about the Iron
ships.
Fleet,
Yeah, exactly.
I think too. Now I can't stop thinking about the no feeling that he gets with Danny after a while. I think a lot of that too is head versus heart. I really think he felt for her and just logically knew this is not right. So I feel that had to have been a head versus heart kind of thing. I mean, the first woman he loved chocked him full of arrows. So it's kind of he doesn't have the best luck when it comes to women or allies or the only people that ever were. No, never mind. I was gonna say his siblings, but not all of them were good to him either. Man, poor Jon. This is a really depressing panel.
Poor
Poor guy.
His sisters do good kind of.
Also, please, again, I've seen a couple of people kind of raise their hands. If you have questions, please go to the mics. We are not going to be able to hear you otherwise. I'm really sorry. Or like we might, but the people on the other side of the room will not. Yes. Okay, you were first. I saw your hand first earlier.
Does this work?
Is it
That's
on?
pretty loud.
I'm sorry. Just tap it. Is it on? Okay. Yeah, it's on. You got to lean in real close.
The first thing I was going to say is that incest was kind of accepted then, so him breaking things off because they were related doesn't always feel right, even though it feels weird to say that. The second thing is, in a word of advice to everybody, if someone has two very large dragons, you probably shouldn't dump them. It won't work out well for you.
Oh my gosh, what was that? What was that scene where like the dragons were watching them make out, and the dragons were just like, and John was like, "Whoa." I will say this though. I'm not going to completely disagree with you. However, incest was grudgingly accepted in Westeros with the Targaryens because they were the Targaryens.
Right.
But like there's a big reason that like it was expected that when the Targaryen dynasty was gone that it wasn't going to happen anymore. And of course like there's always some like incest because all of the High Lords and everything, they're all kind of like related or distantly related to each other. But like I mean the Cersei and Jaime thing, that was a big ass secret because like they knew that this, you know, Cersei wanted to be like, but the Targaryens did it, but really like they knew that this was very much frowned upon outside of the Targaryen dynasty. So like I'm not completely disagreeing with you because incest was absolutely a thing outside of that, but like the direct like aunt and uncle, I mean this was like Daenerys's brother's son. That's like a little bit different than like a first or second cousin even. So like keep that in mind for sure because like yeah, the Targaryen siblings got married, but it was okay, quote unquote, because they were Targaryens. This was something that Westeros as a whole only accepted because they were Targaryens. And Jon was not raised as a Targaryen, he was raised as a Stark. So like Daenerys absolutely is like, whatever man, you're my uncle, I don't care. But Jon's over here like, this is a little bit weird. Go ahead.
I was just say you all bagging on Jon pretty bad for going with. I mean, like it was pretty brutal up here going for him going with Dany, but like he wasn't the only one. Like the entire series, she attracted people who had nowhere else to go. It started with Jorah, and then Tyrion came to her only when he had nowhere else to go, and then what's his name came to her as well. I mean, everyone ends up at Dany when they've alienated the entirety of Westeros.
I don't know.
And
I mean,
that's why I think Jon like kind of latched on. It's like she takes in the like outcast, if you will, and wants to bring justice to those that are, you know, in a bad spot, if you will. So I feel like it's just like natural for these like types to flock to her. Hey, by the way, to like flock to her, and
I think
so weird.
I feel like we're bagging a little bit on Jon for sticking with Dany after he found out that she was his aunt, but like, I don't bag on him for like getting with her like in the first place because like hot girl with some dragons, like who doesn't want that, right?
I think some of it too was he thought he saw himself as like a check on her. He thought that maybe if I'm here, I can kind of rein her in, keep her a little bit grounded, until he very obviously couldn't at the very end.
Yeah, for sure.
Jon also, his entire MO was like taking care of the White Walkers and like eliminating that threat. And I mean, it's gonna sound corny, but she's kind of fire to fight that ice. And I feel like he had to have been thinking, well, this allegiance could really help me with the White Walker situation I got on my hands. So I feel like maybe breaking things off with her could also have made him nervous in terms of like that also hurts my chances of defeating the White Walkers. And so I mean, yeah, I like Jon, don't get me wrong, I really like him as a character. I just the incest, like, I'm not ever gonna get behind. Like, it's just gonna be weird.
That's an okay feeling
Always.
to have.
I mean, Matt, like you, how do you feel about John, like, maybe not staying with Danny, but like getting with her in the first place? Like, it's kind of obvious, right? Like, it's the Song of Ice and Fire.
So yes, I think John going with Daenerys makes a lot of sense from both a character standpoint and a narrative standpoint. I do think just all this conversation has led me to another moment where I think the show a little bit failed it. The internal character, you could argue either way, but the Daenerys' fellow dragon riders and that moment of who that's going to be was kind of a large source of speculation and a lot of build-up and narrative. And then when we got to it in the show, I feel like a hard failed it is that first moment where Jon gets on the dragon, and it felt anticlimactic for something that should have been one of the great climaxes. And even Daenerys' moment, Daenerys' first dragon riding moment is a huge moment. The moment in Marine is a huge moment both in the books and in the show. And so the next dragon rider should have been fundamentally like a fundamental game changer. And instead it was this thing that happened, and then we got an interesting CGI scene, and then it, and then it was touched on in the battle. And then after that, okay, Daenerys forgot about the Iron Fleet, and we lose the dragon. And so this thing that felt titanic was both anticlimactic in the moment and then ultimately narratively unimportant. And I think that's another kind of case where why I feel like the show kind of failed Jon Snow, is that Jon Snow being a dragon rider is a historic moment in Westeros, and it kind of didn't lead to anything.
Yeah, no, it led to literally nothing. I mean, she had already lost one of the dragons, like, north of the wall, and then, again, like, Jon Snow gets a dragon, and the dragon immediately gets shot down by the Iron Fleet. I can't imagine in any way, shape, or form that is the way the author intended for that storyline to go. Like, I'm sorry, but we haven't been teased about the 3 dragon riders for how many years now? 25. For it to finally be like, yeah, but the second we get to a point where Daenerys has rideable dragons and is in Westeros, they're all just dead. That's a big failed it for the show, but like I don't think it's a failed it for Jon Snow as a character. That's just a big failed it for Benioff and Weiss for rushing the last season. Does anybody disagree with that? Did you have a follow up or okay, your turn.
Okay, I'm gonna try to use this, but I'm so tall it's kind of awkward. Yeah, there we go. So, yeah, I think in terms of like nailed it or failed it, I think, over the first half of the series, they nailed it, right? Like, he was, for me, I really like connected with Jon Snow. I was like, this guy's awesome. Like, I want to be like this guy. And I think the character, like what Matthew was talking about, was such an elegant way of putting it, about being the outsider, and that makes sense. Like, when you look at it from that perspective, his actions make sense. But I think like all the hype leading up to it, like even the stuff with the Night King, like the history that they had, and just as a fan, it's kind of like the Mountain and the Hound. You want to see that fight, right? Like for me, like I want to see that fight. Like, yeah, it may be boring from like a writer's viewpoint, but me as a fan that's been hyped up, like to have that misdirection, it hurt my soul a little bit.
I mean, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it.
I saw that. And just the other part where I think the show kind of like failed that character was when Daenerys comes, like Jon Snow had just been crowned King of the North.
Yeah.
The complexity of this show, everything has a repercussion to it, an action to it. You have all these lords who have their own thoughts and opinions. Part of being a good leader that the show has said time and time again is you got to learn how to navigate those things. And when you don't, you end up dead. And he didn't. He just like, I'm succeeding to Daenerys, and every lord's like, what? Oh, okay, I guess we're going along with this kind of stuff. And it wasn't believable based on the world that had already been established. So it made it hard as a viewer to just go along with that kind of stuff because of what you guys have referred to about them rushing the process. I kind of wish if they weren't interested in doing it, passing the torch on to someone else so that they could continue that. But of course, I don't know what behind the scenes are like. But those are just kind of my thoughts on like Jon Snow nailed it or failed it.
I mean, I think that we could all probably agree that the 7th and 8th seasons of either there should have been a 9th season or the 7th and 8th seasons should have been the full like 10 episodes that the previous seasons were. I don't think that's really an argument there. They had, even if they didn't want to do further seasons, I think they could have probably worked with the seasons that they had and maybe not finished the story the way, of course, book readers wanted it to. But you're right. Like a lot of the rushing of when Jon Snow is king in the north, and then again, after after of course the whole Robb thing, and it's like that end of like that episode or whatever in the first season is just, and the first book, that chapter is just so freaking moving, and then you get it again with Jon, and it's like, personally, I was like, I would rather just them be screaming Sansa, Queen in the North. But like, I'll be like okay with this for like a hot minute, and then like it's all, like you said, all those lords, they and they say it over and over again too. They're like, we don't really know this person. We don't want to bow to her. Now, granted, she does help them fight, the Night King, the White Walkers, their armies, etc. But it's very much like it's rushed, and she is so much of an outsider that, and they have been so set in their, we want a Northern Kingdom, first with Robb and then with Jon, that like this isn't just going to change overnight. And it's very and the fact that Jon is just like, just accept it is very weird, especially after everything that he's been through.
He's fought positions of power repetitively, but I feel like he was King of the North kind of as a stepping stone to make my girl Sansa Queen of the North. And I think that was like a product of rushing the show, because Jon Snow is not the kind of guy to be like, I'll be king. Sure. Like, he's going to shirk that responsibility out of just being humble. Not even like, obviously he doesn't mind responsibility. He just doesn't care for a lot of power. So I feel like he became King of the North just so that Sansa would end up Queen of the North. You know what I mean? Like, it was like a stepping stone more than anything else.
I don't know, though. He kept wanting to just bow his ass to Daenerys.
Yeah. But
do you have any thoughts?
I need your help kind of thing. Like, it was, I don't know, everything was just like, not like for love. It was for like political gain or this or that, or,
Any thoughts before we get another question? Okay. You, sir?
Just a couple of things. First, let's have a moment because Howland Reed actually was there, so we can add him to the list of people that knew as well.
Yeah.
The other thing that I want to mention I just thought of was Jon was there was precedent for what he did, because if I'm not mistaken, when the Targaryens first went to the north, back then, he brought all the entire army there and was like, okay, we bow to you, we're good. Because he had seen what happened in the south. So we could say Jon was doing the same thing, saving his people from having to be burned by dragons.
He's doing the old gods' work.
Right.
But yes.
But the main reason why I got up here was all three of you touched on something which I think is very important, is the failure of, the reason why Jon is a failure is despite all the things that he has seen happen, he did not change. And that lack of change is what killed Ned, it's what killed Robb, and it's as if he just did not change his way of thinking as like, okay, well, maybe I should be more fluid on some of these decisions I'm making or the people I'm backing, because I don't know if it would have made it a more dynamic story, but for me, it would have made him more interesting to see him change and not be so predictable. You understand
But
what
I
I'm
think that's the Stark way, at least for the Stark men,
Yeah.
Exactly.
is to be
Yeah.
so predictable.
But yeah, I think for me, I think that's a failure because I like for my characters to sort of change and grow, and he did it. Like Sansa did, Arya did, Sam did. You want to see characters change and develop, and unfortunately, he never did that. Even after he died, you would think that would be something that would be a catalyst for change, and it wasn't. He just stayed the course all the way through to the end, and that's all I want to say.
Sure. So to address both your points. So first, for people who don't know, the thing he's referencing is Torrhen Stark, when the Aegon Targaryen first invaded, was the king who knelt. And so I think it is an effective historical parallel to have an independent northern kingdom fundamentally recalculate their need for independence based on the fact that this invader is not just some random southern invader, but they are Targaryen with dragons. I think that's an interesting historical callback. And obviously the calculus there is different. Torrhen Stark knelt to save his people. Jon was kneeling to save his people, but primarily to entice the help of the dragons to fight the White Walkers. But I think that's a very cool historical parallel, and it does somewhat justify the kneeling to the Northern Lords. When Robb Stark is first crowned king in the North, the great Jon famously says, "Hey, it was the dragons we bowed to, and the dragons are dead." But when Jon Snow bows to Daenerys, the dragons are alive. Does somebody else want to talk about the second part, or?
No. I mean, I totally get that. I think from my perspective, it's just like, I didn't have a problem with him bowing to Daenerys at first, for sure, because obviously, again, dragons. But I think that his continued just persistence in following her, or at least at the very least acting like, because here's the thing, like, I think that the show didn't do a good job of showing us whether, or well, that I don't want to blame it on the actor, I hate doing that, but like between the actor, the directing, the writing, the show did not do a very good job of showing us whether he was blindly following her because he just wanted that, or whether he was like afraid of her, or whether he actually believed in her. Regardless, like, at some point, man, you being dumb. I'm sorry, but you being dumb, and like there was no, it was like from point A to point B, like 1 second he's like, I'm your man, I don't want the throne, I'm following you, and the next second, he's stabbing her. So I get that at some point there was a break, but again, there was literally nothing, not from the actor, not from the writing, not from the directing, that showed us where that breaking point was. It was just, and that goes back to the fact that it was just all very rushed, I think.
And I think they were trying to hold the suspense of how he felt, and I think that hurt the character.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and I think that there's also a way that they could have shown him, kind of break, because it's like, you see him being a little bit weirded out that she's his aunt, but like there was so little from point A to point B that you cannot tell me. I don't think that Kit Harington is a bad actor.
Oh,
I'm
brilliant.
sure the directors weren't terrible. You cannot tell me that there wasn't a way that they couldn't have kind of, just made it a little bit more palatable for him to go from I'm obsessed with you to I'm gonna just stab you. Yes, sir. This Ned
Done.
looking guy. You're John. You look like Ned right now. You look like young Ned to me. I'm sorry. I'm going young Ned, honestly.
So this is the victory party outfit. Anyways. But great segue. I'd say Jon nailed it up through the end of the long night and failed it post. I think Jon's main mission is defeating the White Walkers, saving the North from the White Walkers. The best way to do that is recruit Daenerys with her dragons to defeat the White Walkers.
Right.
I don't believe Jon was truly in love with Daenerys. I think he was using her for the dragon power. And you can see in the show, the day after they defeat the White Walkers, he cools towards her significantly. And coincidentally, that's the same time he finds out that she's his aunt, which is a convenient excuse to kind of break it off.
I don't know that Jon is that smart. I'm sorry.
I mean, I think he had feelings for her. I don't know if he was like madly in love with her, but I do think he cared deeply for her on a romantic level.
I don't think that's true at all.
No?
No, I think it was a ploy that he's using her to.
Oh,
to
no, I
He's so
disagree.
honorable. I can't
completely
imagine him
disagree
being
with
like,
this.
I'm going to play with this girl's heart and emotions, use her armies, do what I got to do, and then throw her to the side.
I honestly don't think that Jon has that much like thought in his head to like play with somebody that deeply. Like I really think he cared about her.
Eager to get on the side of the White Walkers.
No lies. Have you read the books?
Up through mid book 5.
Okay, so you've read the books, and you really don't think he loved Ygritte either?
I think she had like the upper hand, and he kind of had no choice because he's surrounded by wildlings, and that's his way to not get killed by wildlings.
I mean, he lost his virginity to her. I think he
I
loved her a
think
little.
we're in love.
I think maybe he didn't want to love her, but he was like a little bit in love just from the virginity thing.
They got married and had a kid
I
after,
think
you know.
ultimately he is in love with her, but it's kind of a Stockholm syndrome that she has the upper hand, she's an older woman, etc.
I mean, maybe he likes a, more powerful woman.
Jon absolutely wants that woman who's just gonna tell him what the
He's a
fuck to
sub.
do. Wait a minute, is this a late enough panel that I don't have to pay $20 for that swear?
So after the long
Oh, I owe you $40 now.
after the long night, I think he drops the ball. He should have claimed not just rulership of the North, but all of Westeros, since he is the legitimate heir to the Seven Kingdoms. And it quells the question of Northern independence, because I believe if they elected Jon as king of the North, and Jon is the legitimate king of the South Six Kingdoms, he can reunify the kingdoms, whether by marrying Daenerys and having a co-rulership, or murdering Daenerys and being the sole surviving king.
Okay, I have to ask. This is a poll right now. How many of you think Jon was in love with Ygritte? How many of you think that Jon was in love with Daenerys? Okay, well, let's rephrase. Okay, in lust with Daenerys. Okay, there we go. Thank you. Do any of you? How many of you think he was just using Daenerys though?
I wanted it to be that.
I think we got like 2 or 3 votes here. I like the idea of it, but I just don't think that Jon Snow. I don't, as a Stark especially. I mean, and honestly, you are like up on the Starks. So like, do you think as a Stark that Jon Snow really would have just like used somebody like that?
It seems inconsistent with the character we know. Right?
Yeah.
Honor is his.
And especially
Jon
his.
Snow stabbed somebody in the heart to save his kingdom. But like, I don't think season 1 Jon Snow would have done that. I think he does progress and change.
Yes, I think in that way, and I think that's a following on of Ned. Now, I do think if you wanted to support your theory, I think you could make the argument that Jon, so much being Ned's son, that Ned pulled an enormous deception with Jon Snow because he felt it was necessary, and therefore you could argue that if Jon felt wooing Daenerys was necessary, that he would do a great deception to do so. I think there's a in-universe justification for that. I'm not particularly on like a Jon aping Littlefinger sort of devious plan thing. That's not how I perceive him, but I see your thing. Yeah. I also wanted to grab on, you mentioned that you feel like Jon succeeded through the long night, and a previous person mentioned that they kind of wanted to see the Jon Night King battle. I think for Jon, I do think it's a successful narrative arc for him just to bring the forces together that are necessary to defeat the White Walkers and the Night King. I don't think he necessarily needed to be the person to personally slay the Night King. I obviously feel like that's a battle that's set up for us, that, the very famous staring into his eyes scene. But I think it's okay that wasn't that Jon did defeat the Night King by bringing all of the pieces, Daenerys and the dragons of the Dothraki. And
Oh God, nobody wants to talk about that.
I think they maybe could have made his particular long night actions, either as a general or as an individual, a little more heroic, especially because we know the Night King is kind of also obsessed with Jon as being kind of the one who got away. And so there's a different world where like they kind of show you that like Jon charging at the Night King is what pulls the other White Walkers away, which leaves the Night King unprotected. I think there are things they could have done to kind of sell that a little better, but I do agree that like Jon's kind of, if you want to pull him back all the way back, what is this character doing? His purpose is to unite the disparate, broken forces of Westeros to defeat the Night King, and he does that successfully. And I do think that's a nailed it.
Yeah, I feel like the Night King fight could have echoed the Ned Stark versus Arthur Dayne battle.
Yes.
With Arya being a Howland Reed coming out,
Yes.
like with a killing blow with the knife, and I thought for sure that's what they're going to set up, but they didn't do it. Even though they changed the actor for the Night King to be their sword stunt coordinator,
Yes.
which that points at a giant sword fight at the end, which never happened.
Also, I'm just going to say that like there have now been 2 people in this audience who have gotten up and spoken and mentioned Howland Reed, and I want to ask you if you are Chloe Shills. If you don't know who Chloe is, then listen to Girls Gone Canon, because I'm pretty sure you're Chloe Shills. I don't actually trust that you aren't. Yes, question over here.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Robb. They hit all the same story beats. Robb was crowned king in the north, fell in love with a foreigner, ostracized his bannerman like the car starts, and then eventually was betrayed by his bannerman. Presumably, Jon Snow is aware of all of these events. Do you think that it was Jon's intention to try to emulate Robb?
I just think that I don't think being a trusting person is like a bad thing, or even naive. So that's I don't know. I shouldn't even have started talking. I don't know how to answer that, honestly. I feel bad for talking about Jon like we are. Like I feel guilty.
I'm glad you do, because I don't. Somebody has to, I guess. I mean, I think that I think that what the real thing is that, again, the Starks being the honorable Starks that they are, and it's kind of funny with their words being "winter is coming," and it's the Tully words that are family, duty, honor. But so much of the time, all of the Starks and Jon, who is technically like a Targaryen, even though his mother was a Stark, they really do go for more of that duty and honor, especially portion of the Tully words. And Jon, again, obviously not a Tully, as we all know. So Catelyn really hated him. I don't think that he was trying to emulate him by any means. I mean, but I think that that's one of the weird things that the show, writers, directors, etc., actually kind of got right, was that just the thematic, representation of that family and the members in it, and how little they really bend and change. Let me rephrase. The male members in it don't really bend and change. And Jon was just, he it seems like he emulated Robb only because he just stuck to that same sort of, life and decision making that his brother did, because that is what their father taught them.
To grab onto that, one, if you're going to marry a foreigner, again, marry a foreigner with dragons. It helps.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a rule for life.
Right. Yeah. If they have dragons, marry them.
If you take anything away from this panel, it's that.
Don't get married unless somebody has dragons.
I don't think Jon was consciously emulating Robb. But I do agree there are distinct and I think intentional, from a narrative standpoint, parallels. And on the related topic of Jon changing and whether this is sort of these cycles are repeating and one of our previous commenters also mentioned kind of about the lack of change. I think, and seeing the things that happened before and how those characters died and how this character didn't die, I think as an audience, we tend to treat death as an indication that the person was wrong. And a big part of this story is that your death is not the end of your story. And this is seen very thematically through Ned Stark, who is a character who dies in alleged treasonous shame. But he's a character who has evoked, I often joke that A Dance with Dragons is a book about Ned Stark. And he's evoked heavily also in the later seasons. There's a great scene with Jon talking to Theon about how he can be a Greyjoy and a Stark. And that centers around Ned. And Jon in the Dragon Pit also evokes Ned and about how words have to have meaning. And so I think it is entirely plausible that Jon saw what happened to Ned and saw what happened to Robb and felt like, despite their deaths, they did the right things. And he was very comfortable walking down that path because he felt it was right. And so if he's walking that path to his death, then he has accepted that because he knows he's doing what's right.
Well, and even like Theon Greyjoy, he was kind of brought in as a Stark kid the same way Jon was, in a sense. And we see what all happened with Theon. And I think, like, I don't know, Jon, I guess, wasn't really fully aware of what all was going on there, but didn't he know that Theon had, like, allegedly had Bran hung and the younger, I can't remember the younger one's name.
Yeah. I think he
Wasn't
knew
he
that
aware?
that had supposedly happened, but like obviously he found out.
Because you would think they would have parallels, so they're both kind of like the outsider Stark kids in a sense. And he was not going to go the Theon route. He was going to go more of the Robb route. And through example, I think he made the right choice.
Yeah. Oh God, Theon. That's an entirely different story.
Yeah.
Okay, question over here.
I have a couple comments.
How dare you?
Strain my brain. One, a lot of comparison between Jon and Dany, just an observation I made. Can you hear me? I just realized I went into the microphone.
A little bit closer.
Jon, I think, was trying to find justice, if you will, and ended up with power.
Mm-hmm.
Dany, trying to find power, ends up also trying to find justice. I think that's sort of a difference between them. I don't know exactly how that feeds in. There was just a lot of Jon-Dany comparison a minute ago, and I thought of that. Also, wanted to say that we've all agreed that they were just kind of rushing things, but the idea of the North, or Jon as King of the North, bowing to Dany, even if there's precedent for it, or he's doing it to save the people, I can see a lot of ways it makes sense. But the fact is, there would still be a lot of politics behind it. It wouldn't just be like, okay, I bow the knee. Okay, we all bow the knee. Let's move forward. There would be backroom conversations and arguments about taxation rates and all this other stuff that George loves to go into for entire freaking books.
Right, of
that
course.
the show just maybe gave one scene to, so I guess that's a fail. The other was, I want to argue that Jon did change, both in the books and the show. I think he changed a lot. You might be able to argue that his core character didn't change, but I'm not even sure if that's true. But he definitely changed the course multiple times. He didn't go to the wall dead set on letting the wildlings through, right? That was a big change in him, and it was not without like a lot of support from other. He had to make this huge decision change about. I don't know. I think there's other ways he might have changed too that might be more subtle or maybe game in debate. But the idea when he showed up, he didn't get that he was a better fighter than these other people because he was rich and trained, but it didn't make him a better person, right? But I think eventually he did start to understand that, and he wanted to stand up for the lesser soldiers and make sure they did get the right training. He was more humble about himself, etc. So I think you could argue that Jon did change. And also, I wanted to make the point that Matt made, is that even if he was just staying the course, and it got him killed, and then other people, it doesn't mean they were doing the wrong thing just because it got them killed. If it saves their families, or if it preserves the value of a promise made, or whatever else, it might be worth your lives. Anyway. More
Thank
comments
you.
and questions. Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. We love this. I will say though that we're getting close to running out of time, so we're gonna real quick go to you and then to you, and like when I say real quick, we got like 5 more minutes. So
Yeah, I'll keep it short. So, do you think there was a more justifiable reason for the betrayal of Jon Snow by Bowen Marsh and the others in the book, since he like more directly violated the principles of the Night's Watch by like trying to go to the war with Ramsay, and as opposed to just letting the wildlings in the show, and along those lines, do you think there is a good reason for his resurrection in the books going forward?
Okay, so I think, well, yes, I think you could argue that Jon more definitively was violating the Night's Watch oath in the books. An interesting thing is that the assassination was already planned before he gave that speech that finally definitively broke that. He's giving that when he's giving that speech to the wildlings in the hall, the assassination has already been planned, which is kind of an interesting combination of how things are escalating. I do think though that sort of the books thing of the violation being this disagreement over the wildlings and whether Jon is really still serving the Night's Watch's purpose is a little bit handled in the show. I would agree with that.
yeah, it's I mean honestly, like so when Jon Snow was murdered, of course, by his brothers in the Night's Watch, and I use brothers lightly because what's that kid's name? Ollie. Nobody counts him. He doesn't count.
I can't say that thing. We can't swear.
Yeah, don't swear. Don't swear. I've done it too much already, and honestly, I have 2 more panels tomorrow, so I'm just gonna get the cash out later.
I'm scared. He's a little bastard.
So when Jon gets murdered by his quote unquote brothers in the Night's Watch, it's definitely like he. Oh, I don't know. It's very difficult for me to talk about this and not just be like, I mean, I get why they did it, but also like, for Christ's sake, like the show just, in the books, and I think especially in the show, it's like when they have the little boy be part of it, it's like really weird because like he's like, yeah, I just like came from Molestown and like the wildlings like, you know, wrecked my town, so like I'm part of this now. And it was very much like shock value, but that is what Game of Thrones is about. So.
I mean, that was definitely an FU to Jon to include Ollie. I mean, it's like who's going to include a child in a murder? Like it was just like
only
an extra,
Game of Thrones
to
I
Jon.
agree about the show. I was just primarily talking about the books.
Okay.
Or why it was different.
Oh, I know. I'm sorry. It's just so hard to just not be like, but the show did it so badly. Well, especially just in a Nailed It or Failed It panel when we're supposed to be talking about like the differences between what happened in the show and what happened in the books. It's like when he was murdered in the books, and like, of course, we haven't seen him come back. I remember being at Ice and Fire Con, and we were watching the premiere. I think it was 2016. It must have been 2016. We were watching like the premiere episode of that season, and we were like, we literally took bets on when Jon would come back that season, and I was like, whoever bets the correct episode gets a prize. And weirdly enough, only one person actually bet that he would come back in the second episode, because I'm pretty sure it was the second episode, whatever the episode was, but I'm pretty sure it was the second. And I feel like we don't know exactly how it's going to happen, of course, in the books. You know what I mean? It's going to be more involved, I'm sure. But I mean, and who knows how long, I mean, we'll have to wait. It's going to happen in Winds of Winter for sure, but somebody over there is saying, no, it's not.
Loki's never been.
Oh, okay. Come on. Let's not go there.
And yes, I think there's going to be a much better explanation for Jon's revival in the books
Yeah.
revolving around warging into ghosts and his body being preserved in
Yeah.
the wall itself. There's a lot of setup for that.
Yeah. Okay, real quick, one more.
Sorry, I just wanted to quickly offer my interpretation or another like theory for why Jon vowed to Dany, which is not maybe disappointing, but not entirely unrealistic or unsympathetic in my opinion, which is not that he was necessarily in love with her or manipulating her, but that he was just exhausted and lonely. And like his entire life, he's like this person who is completely driven by his ideals and his principles, and he's like making all these decisions. He had like decision fatigue from all this right or wrong, and nobody is backing him or supporting him. He's on his own, and he finally like meets somebody who he decides for whatever reason he believes in and he can have faith in because of her actions. And so it's like, oh, what a relief. I can like just support her and not have to do this all by myself anymore. And so then when she starts making questionable decisions, it's like this like, you know, cognitive dissonance where it's like, but I decided to believe in you and I never back off of what I like, that's who I am, but that's like now you're not acting like you were supposed to, and I don't really know what to do anymore because I kind of gave up on making these decisions myself. So
oh yeah, that's a good, yeah, I kind of gave up on making these decisions myself.
It made sense too.
Okay, so we're gonna close it out real quick, but I want to do a couple quick votes. First of all, who thinks that Game of Thrones, the show, nailed it with Jon Snow?
Okay.
Wow, really? Really? We got like.
I think it's because we just spent a panel arguing about all
yeah, we got like 2% of the audience here is like, maybe? Okay, failed it. Who thinks they failed it with Jon Snow? Where's the rest of you at? Like, there's like, oh, that's only like 20. We've got like 22% of the audience voting. Okay. Better question, though. Better question. Who thinks that it is absolutely legitimate that Jon Snow rode off with the wildlings at the end? Because, right?
For sure. That's
really? We're still only at like 40% here. What is going on?
That's what he wanted to be.
Where are your people's opinions?
I was the failed guy, but one of the ways I think the show nailed it is that the ending with Jon, of him, again, who this person who's been this outsider, choosing affirmatively to go with the wildlings. And finding a sort of home was a nailed it, and that this is that one thing, and also him being with Ghost and Tormund, and despite the fact that he's lost so much, he's lost the women he loved, he's lost his family, and he's lost even Sam through his exile. He has still this group that he's found, and that Jon, the outsider, has found a place where he can find home. I think is an absolute nailed it. I think they think they nailed that in the show, and I think they portrayed that well. And I thought that last moment with him was really great.
I mean, honestly, that's what I was going for. I was like, I'm asking people to raise their hands if they thought that they nailed it with Jon going off with the wildlings, and I'm like, there's like maybe 40% of you raising your hands, and I feel like very sad that you don't like. That people don't actually feel like that exact, because that's going to be Jon's ending. That is meant to be his ending, honestly. He is not meant to be a ruler. He is meant to go off with his buddies north of the wall and just live his life in the cold, frigid north.
And in the show, the alternative is being executed. So he ends up getting what he really wants, and he's with Ghost.
He's good. He's good.
But he can always come back from north of the wall.
No, he can't. There's no coming back from north of the wall. The story is over, and also this panel is too.
And Sansa's not going to let it happen.
Good night, you guys. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for your lovely conversation. Thank you for listening to the Geek Saga podcast. If you like what you heard, please check out other Geek Saga entertainment endeavors, including the Sagas and Sass webcast and podcast and Ice and Fire Con.